and good afternoon, friends. Thank you very much for taking the time out for joining this webinar. So today we are going to talk about how to embed remote selling in the ever-changing workplace landscape. This webinar is brought to you by Harbinger Interactive Learning. Harbinger Interactive Learning is a global design and development company and has over 30 years of experience in delivering innovative custom learning solutions for various industry verticals. For more information, you can log on to harbingerlearning.com. And we want this to be an interactive session. So at any point of time, if there are any thoughts, questions that come to your mind, please feel free to type them in the chat box or in the Q&A section, and we will take them up at the appropriate time. My name is Rahul, and I'll be presenting this session for today. A little bit about myself. I'm a digital learning enthusiast and passionate about helping organizations and business leaders solve business challenges through intervention of learning technologies. So to begin with, let's spend a few moments and try to understand the business need. Why are we talking about remote sales, and why has it become important? Well, in the post-pandemic world, we all would acknowledge that business travel is restricted. Conferences and events are getting canceled left, right, and center. We are pretty much under lockdown globally, staying home, trying to flatten the curve, working remotely. So what does all this means to the way we have been doing sales? Well, this is indeed a multi-pronged challenge for the sales professionals. The need of the hour is to adapt to these changes in an agile manner. And before we take a deep dive into this issue, I think let us ask a question to ourselves. So, on your screens now, you will see a poll coming up, and you'll have multiple options. You can respond to that poll. So let me put up the poll here. All right, so the question that we are asking is, what were actually your most effective sales methodologies in pre-pandemic world? And you have 5 options there, and you can give multiple responses. You can select multiple options for your response. And if there's anything specific which is not getting covered in this poll, please feel free to type it in the chat box. So we see a lot of responses coming in. Probably we'll give it another few seconds, 5 more seconds. All right, so now we'll end the poll, and let me share the results with you. A majority of us, in fact, 79% of us feel that conferences and trade shows were the most effective sales methodologies in pre-pandemic world. The second highest is the networking, which is around about 65%. And then inside sales, others are some of the other options, results that we have got. Right, thank you very much for taking the time out to provide these responses. So, what it means for chief learning officers and chief sales officers? What are the mandates that are emerging out of this? Well, firstly, we would acknowledge that the proven sales methodologies might not be relevant going forward. The conferences, trade shows, in-person meetings, networking events, they're not happening, and probably we don't know for how long. Well, to top it, the buying behavior of organizations is also changing rapidly. Some of the common things that we get to hear is there is a budget freeze on non-essential expenses. And since the opportunity size is getting smaller, which primarily means the competition is getting stiffer day by day. So what it means for the L&D leaders and sales leaders, these changing scenarios, they have to come together and help embed a culture of remote sales in the ever-changing workplace, or if I may say, remote workspace. Now is the time for us to take a deeper look at the 5 pillars that we have been talking, which can help us embed remote sales cultures in our organization. These 5 pillars are reskilling, engagement, sales enablement tools, storytelling, and consultation. Each one of these 5 pillars are a result of a question posed in front of us. First, we'll look at the question. Then maybe for some, we'll take your inputs. For some, we'll share our insights and also look at a particular example for each of these 5 pillars. So let's move ahead. Pillar number 1, reskilling. So what does reskilling means when it comes to remote sales? Well, there could be multiple things, but 2 immediate things which come to my mind when we start talking about reskilling for effective remote selling are the first one is purely from the soft skills perspective. The way we had been interacting with our prospects face to face, sitting across the table, having a cup of coffee together, networking during conferences and trade shows, all that has changed. We have to quickly help our sales force learn the nuances of prospecting in a virtual world, use a web meeting tool, effectively, and all those kind of things. The second thing which comes to my mind is how to get your sales force up to speed with the product knowledge and knowledge around the new service line offerings. Some of the products or services which your teams was selling or were pretty popular and there was a demand for it, some might become obsolete in this post-pandemic situation. For some, the demand might start decreasing gradually. So what do? As a business, we keep innovating. And while our product and tech teams do the engineering part, we need to quickly help our sales teams learn how to connect the dots in terms of solving business objectives using these new products or new service line offerings. Now let's take some inputs from our audience on this. So that brings us to our second poll, and you will shortly see a poll coming up on your screen. So the question is around reskilling. And let me launch that poll for you. So the question is, what is a key area wherein you foresee a need for reskilling your sales team? Again, you can provide multiple responses to this question. And if there is anything specific that you want to point out, please feel free to type it in the chat box. The options that we have: presenting virtually, effective networking in virtual environment, getting up to speed with new products and services, and last one is identifying new opportunities arising out of this post-pandemic situation. Right, let's give it a few more seconds. There's 78% people who have responded to this question till now. All right, so I think now it's time to close this poll and let's share this results. Right, so effective networking and presenting virtually, 65% of the population, the audience population, feels that these are the 2 key things that they need to do. Along with it, ability to identify new opportunities arising out of this post-pandemic situation is at 48%. So here we go. We see that, there are certain skills wherein we need to focus in terms of reskilling. And thank you once again for taking the time out to participate in this poll. Now let's move ahead. So some of the insights that we would like to share from our side in terms of reskilling. First and foremost is I think we should encourage our sales teams to participate in virtual forums. probably the first time or the second time, they might not get it right, but there's a lot of learning on the go that will happen. They'll start, learning the nuances while they attend these events, to the extent these virtual conferences. The second one is leveraging the power of video-based training. Video was a powerful training mode and continues to be a powerful training mode. In fact, video can help you promote user-generated content. Let's say you have a dispersed sales force across various states, and if you provide them the ability, or if you allow them to create user-generated content, just by picking up their cell phone, recording a video, and sharing their experiences in terms of, hey, this is a challenge that I faced particularly with this type of customer or prospect, and this is the solution that we propose, or these are the type of new opportunities or skill types that people are talking. So it enables, what this does basically is user-generated content, video-driven, is allowing you to create a culture of collaboration and best practice sharing. So teams can help each other, handle situations in a particular way. So this was all about, we spoke about reskilling, and now is the time we'll bring up a sample use case for you. So this sample use case basically was empowering sales reps to sell remotely. This is an organization, a customer of ours, one of the largest insurance service providers in the US, with a global workforce of around 50,000 odd employees. And as we all would acknowledge, insurance sales is a high-touch activity. It is all about in-person meetings, discussions, but in the post-pandemic situation, this might not work for a long time. In fact, it's changing right now. So what do? We help them put together a video-based learning solution in a record time of probably around a couple of weeks, which in turn is then rolled out to the sales reps across the globe to empower them to sell remotely. So leveraging the power of video to train your remote sales force. Right, so that was a lot we spoke about pillar number one. Now let's move on to the pillar number two, which is engagement. Now let us ask ourselves, is there a need to engage with our prospects and customers differently? Well, from my side, I'll answer that question for you with an example. One of our customers with whom we do pretty good business every year in the digital learning space is in the construction space. And typically we had been developing a lot of compliance training programs for them. But since due to COVID-19, their operations have been hit and the work has been temporarily stalled. So what do? So we started discussing with them, and the discussion kind of went into the business continuity direction. And one opportunity area that evolved out was, from the customer side, is how do we upskill our people so that they can return back to work safely when things start normalizing? Because it's not going to be as normal as it was the pre-pandemic situation. Things are going to be different, so people need to act, behave, react, respond differently. So we need to train them. So if you would have just noticed, the terms of engagement became totally different here. Earlier we were talking about, okay, what is the best possible solution or the best authoring tool or the best modality in which we could create these compliance training programs. But now it's all about solving that specific business challenge, and the other things might just take a backseat. So some other insights in terms of what are those engagement areas which we can think of, which can allow you to, or have conversations, or you can continue with conversations and eventually lead to opportunities. So we spoke about business continuity. We should also explore different business models with our established customers and even prospects, different payment terms, different kind of team models, the way we have been working. So all that should be explored. This is also an opportunity for you to keep your customers and prospects educated, and not just educated, but this is also an opportunity to bring in optimism a ray of hope. So you can share all the things that you have been doing with your customers, wherein people are leveraging digital learning technologies to bring in, specific, meet business specific objectives, or, bring in certain changes. That will give them optimism and positivity in terms of, okay, how things are shaping, changing. It will also help them keep educated in terms of what's happening in their industry or other industries. And maybe there's something which will be interesting for them, and today or tomorrow you can get into an actual conversation with them. And well, in sales, it's all about closing. So of course, the end of the day, the buyer wants to buy and the seller wants to sell, and there is a relationship. But how do you make this process more meaningful? Your customers and prospects do not need a tons of follow-up emails or, messages. What you can do to make this journey enjoyable for both of you is you can set up small wins, small milestones, define those milestones, clearly communicate to the customer and prospect, and these milestones come before the actual close. So over here, I'll, talk about a sample use case. Typically restaurant, bars, these are pretty high active workplaces. If you've ever noticed, I don't know if anyone has sat through a restaurant for 8 hours or 12 hours for a stretch, but try doing that if you would have, whenever you get a chance. If you go to a restaurant, let's say for a brunch, and then you go for a dinner in the evening time, you might see the same person serving you, and they might just be doing an 8-hour stretch or a 10-hour stretch. So it's that active. So where do they get? They do not have typical desk jobs. So when do they get time to get trained? So actually, with one of our customers, this entire pandemic situation created a scenario wherein we spoke about business continuity. And okay, so the people have to come back to work, these restaurant and bar employees. So now is the time to train them on those mandatory compliance requirements where we have been lagging. So let's utilize this downtime to get this done. So that's just one sample case, in the engagement space. Right. So that brings us to pillar number 3, which is enablement, sales enablement. Now, sales enablement has been there. There's been a lot that has been spoken about this. But why do we need more robust sales enablement at this point of time? The pertinent question that comes to us, that why is it more than a PowerPoint deck? Well, there are multiple reasons. The first and foremost is to make sure we can help our sales teams utilize their times more judiciously and spend efforts on activities which can help them get more discussions going. Everything is happening on web meetings and video calls, your internal meetings, your meetings with your prospects, customers. There's also a term that's floating around in the market right now that's called Zoom fatigue. And probably that's something which, if you do a lot of these Zoom calls or web meeting calls or video calls, that's kicking in. So we need to ensure that the energy is channelized and utilized in the best possible manner. And once your sales teams are able to channelize and utilize their times properly, and they can get you more discussions, then what they need is they should be equipped with the right tools to deliver the right results and have those meaningful discussions with the customers and prospects. Now, there are certain emerging technologies which we'll have to potentially embrace going forward to help our sales teams or provide those enablement tools. One such technology is artificial intelligence. And now I'll take a pause here and check with the audience as to what they feel about this emerging technology like AI. And this is a time when I'll launch a poll here. So you'll see it coming up on your screen right now. And the question that you have is, Have you considered using artificial intelligence as a potential sales enablement tool? And the options are pretty simple. Yes, no, not sure. Right, so 45% people have voted till now. Thank you very much for the participation. We'll keep this poll open for another 5 to 7 odd seconds. All right, so we'll end the poll now. And 50% of our audience says no, we haven't considered using AI as potential sales enablement tool. And 31% of the audience says that they have considered or might have used AI as a potential sales enablement tool. 19% not sure. So it looks like there's a good bunch of 70 odd percent people whom we can try to convince as to how AI could be one of those potential sales enablement tools. So let me share some insights with you. Well, I've always heard that sales is a lonely job while we were working from offices. And in these days, I mean, in these circumstances, when we are working remotely, it has become much more lonelier. So there's a lot of support that your remote sales teams need. Some of the things like point of need coaching. So what do they do if they have to respond to an email or to a LinkedIn message at the middle of the night? Is that the right time to call upon one of their peers or supervisors? Not exactly. And maybe that's, the question that they are posed with is not too complex one. Someone already has solved that within the organization. So how do we get that information? How do we provide that point of need coaching? Well, consider trying a artificial intelligence enabled chatbot, which could be there, real-time talking points. You're on a call with prospects, and there are certain questions, certain objections that are being thrown at you, and you want to make sure that this meeting of yours gets productive, because the resultant of this meeting could be the next meeting with the prospect. So you don't want to leave anything for chance, or don't want to leave anything unanswered. So you can actually take help of that AI-enabled chatbot to handle objections and get real-time talking points. We just spoke about Zoom fatigue. So there's a lot of these Zoom calls and video calls that our sales team members are doing. Are we able to capture notes out of each of those meetings? In a day, we might be doing multiple, and some of them might be pretty intense in terms of discussion around solutions, problems, business objectives. So what if there is a tool which can create detailed and useful insights out of those video recordings of those web meeting calls and provide it to your sales reps with actionable items in it? And how do we create this entire ecosystem wherein we could integrate these CRMs, which we might be using in the organization, along with the productivity tools, the typical office productivity tools? So these are some of the use cases wherein there's artificial intelligence that can play a role. And apart from artificial intelligence, of course, there's multiple other ways of sales enablement tools, which we can probably sometime talk later in another series of this, or another edition of this webinar. Just from the time constraint perspective, I'm trying to keep it focused on the artificial intelligence perspective in terms of sales enablement tools. So with that, now is the time for me to show you a sample use case. So I'm actually going to show you an AI-enabled virtual coach, which the salespeople, the remote sales force can use to solve certain challenges. This was designed for sales reps of a pharma company in terms of how to have these meaningful conversations with clinicians, how to present their products, new drugs that they have launched. So I'll flip my screens here. So for a moment, you might see a blank screen at your end, and that is purely of the reason I'm trying to bring up another screen to show you. So just bear with me for a couple of seconds, and I will bring up the screen now. All right, so I hope everyone can see a new screen at your end which says QRobot. If you know, if I would request if you know, some of us could just type in the chat box that they can see this new screen, that would help me ensure that I'm on the right screen. And yes, we can see the chat options. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. All right, so we you know, questioned this chatbot called QRobot. And that's the best thing with bots. You can, you know, you can question them, you can call them something, and they would not have a chance to retaliate back in terms of why you call them in a certain way. So just kidding there. So, you know, this QRobot we are talking about, you know, this being the artificial intelligence QRobot. So it says this is a desktop version. You can have it on mobiles, you can have it on iPads, you can integrate it with your office productivity tools like Microsoft Teams or Skype or any of those things. So QRobot says, hi, I'm ActavisBot, ready to start? And I say, yes. So let's see what the QRobot has got for me. So it says, start with your conversation. So it's basically trying to teach me how to get the conversation right with the doctor. So now 3 of them look pretty similar. So I say, okay, go with this. Good morning, doctor. Right, so great, the doctor responded. That's wonderful. You love when prospects respond to you. So let's say if I am being a little straight. So, doctor, how's it going with Cognizant? And Cognizant is just a drug that this particular company has launched. Okay, let's see the response. So you see, I got a thumbs down response because probably that was not the best possible way to have that conversation. They wanted me to do it something differently. So there was an instant feedback that was provided to the learner. So similarly, we can you know, try this again and try and see if we can get a thumbs up response. So I click on Start QRobot. So ready to start? Yes. Okay, let's go. Start with your conversation. Good morning, doctor. Okay, so let me take permission. Wanted you a couple of minutes for a quick discussion. Well, the doctor is pretty busy, but still gives a few seconds. Okay, so let me try and say that, hey, I have some interesting data that might help you treat Alzheimer patients. Okay, looks like the doctor is getting engaged, and the response that I get is, please go ahead. So now I can pitch it. So this was just one example, and yeah, thumbs up, thank you, got that. So this was just one example of QRobot, and this is how we can you know, bring in the enablement features or an environment through which we could enable our remote sales force. All right, so I'm gonna flip screens and go back to the original presentation here. So just give me a moment here. Right, so we are back to the original presentation. And with that, it brings us to pillar number 4, which is storytelling. Now, storytelling, in fact, why storytelling? Well, the simple answer is, who doesn't love stories? Everyone, be it young kids or adults. But from our perspective today, we are talking about brand stories. Brand stories are a very powerful way to deliver a message. It goes beyond products and services. So at this stage, let's take another poll and see as to how many of us believe in stories, and brand stories to be precise. So let me launch this poll, And the question that you'll see is, have you used storytelling? Where's the question? Yeah, have you used storytelling as an effective way for brand building? The options are pretty straightforward. Yes, no, not sure. And if there is any specific story that anyone has used within the audience for brand building, please feel free to, raise your hand or type it in the chat box. We would like the entire audience to know about it. Maybe we can take it up. You can type it right now, and maybe we can take it up towards the end of our conversation discussion. Right, so 60% people of 60% of 65% in fact have voted. I know I've been asking for a lot of throwing a lot of polls, but trust me, I guess this is the last one. So please, your participation is appreciated. All right, so time to end the poll. Wow, wonderful. This is great. 67% of us have used storytelling as an effective way for brand building. Thank you very much for sharing that. 13% said no. And there are 20% odd people who might have used stories, but they're not sure whether they were using these stories for brand building or, so not sure basically. Okay, right. Thank you very much for that active participation. So we're giving you some insights today in terms of why storytelling is important. Those 67% of us already understand that importance, but just for the completeness of the discussion, let me bring up a few insights here. And of course, there could be multiple more. And as I said, we could discuss them towards the end of the conversation. A research says that messages delivered as stories can be up to 22 times more memorable than just facts. So giving facts, stats, pretty good. And probably they're important as well. But if you want the prospect to remember your brand for a relatively longer period of time, try delivering your messages in forms of stories. What it does basically is it helps differentiate your brand from the crowd. And the other things is, some essentials, or in fact, 3 essentials that we should keep in mind while storytelling. Use a narrative. A narrative will basically have, within a story will have the characters, situation, the end result, and all those kind of things. Reflect the essence of the brand. Try to highlight what your brand stands for and display the values that your brand stands for. Through your stories, connect them to those values and end the story there. So I'll give you a sample use case for storytelling. And a lot of us at Harbinger Interactive Learning have been using this story, and one story after the other, and it's kind of become a series of stories, if I may say. So once Flash announced that they will sunset by 2020, a lot of our customers were looking for options through which they could migrate their volume legacy content into newer formats. And what it did was, initially these challenges were thrown to us, and I'm talking this all started like four and a half years back. So initially these challenges came to us, and we just started to scramble what to do, how to handle the situation, because the type of volume that we were talking about, 500 odd hours of learning, 750 odd hours of learning, and this is the limited budget that we have. So it meant we had to bring in automation. We had to create something different, do something differently. And that is where we created this X Smart framework. That's the searchable, modular, accessible, responsive, trackable framework. And we did the first project. We took that story to another prospect rather, who was kind of facing that typical challenge, but was not sure whether what kind of end results would they get. Heard the story, took a leap of faith, went ahead, that built the second story, and it continued. And in fact, it still continues. So that was one just sample use case from storytelling perspective that I wanted to share here today. And probably some of us in the audience might have, already heard these stories a lot of times. So yeah, I can get that feeling. All right. So with that, it brings us to the fifth and final pillar, and an important question. Is consultative sales important? I think there's no debate over there. A lot of us would agree to the fact that consultative sales is definitely important. Pandemic or no pandemic. A lot of us, a lot of organizations, a lot of sales teams have already been practicing this. Of course, the effectiveness, the results that we might have got might vary differently from individual to individual, organization to organization, and there's always room for improvement. But during these uncertain situations, when decision making has relatively become tougher, and the expectations to get a value out of the buck is at an all-time high from your customer and prospects, the need for consultative selling has become pretty important. Your prospect, your customer doesn't need persistent follow-up during these situations. What they need is a meaningful conversation or a series of meaningful conversations with you, which can probably help them make decisions, or at least put together a few options together on the table and take it to a larger group of stakeholders within their organization. And from there onwards, make a decision which is more relevant for that, or most relevant for that particular business. So in terms of consultation, these are the three things we wanted to kind of highlight is, and of course there are a lot of things, and we can go on for ages talking about consultative selling, but just as a starter, so lay out the big picture. I think we have to help our sales teams think about the big picture. It's not just about one project, one particular product, but it's in the long run, what is that one particular project or one particular product trying to solve, and how it will impact the business at a bigger and a larger scale. We just spoke about the importance of providing options. As consultants, we should not just stick to one type of offering, one type of product. We have to provide options. And at times what it means is, there's something which you do not have as a product or service offering, which your customer needs. That's okay. You might have to recommend them to someone else within your network, within the business community to get that done. But the level of confidence that the prospect and customer would have on you would increase significantly, multifold. And then the 3 Ps. If you're trying to convince a customer or a prospect to do something new, something different, or at a larger scale, which requires a larger buy-in and a larger investment, try using this 3 Ps. Start with a proof of concept, prototype it, have it a functional output, and then pilot. Pilot it within a closed user group with a specific target audience, and try to get the user feedback and make any course corrections as required, and then scale it up. So these were just a few cents from our side in terms of consultation. And just in terms of sample use case, so our teams at Harbinger Interactive Learning, and a lot of us, across the board in our audience group have been using this. So it's just a sample use case. We're dealing with a prospect here, which the prospect was pretty hell-bent in, developing a course or developing a series of digital learning material in a particular authoring environment because of their own comfort level and certain reasons. But we had something else to recommend, and we felt that that might be a better situation. So we didn't try to force that solution on them. What we did was, okay, firstly, we convinced them to have a discussion or at least have a look at the multiple options. And they were very graceful in accepting that fact. And, let's look at the options. Then we sat down and did a pros and cons analysis of developing those digital learning programs in authoring tool environment A versus authoring tool environment B. And what happened actually was they actually chose the recommendation that was made by our team, or which was not the original preference of the prospect. And the end result, we were able to develop content, digital content, which is future-proof to upcoming certain technology disruptions with some good cost savings. So just a sample use case, consultative style. In fact, it would be very interesting to hear from the audience. And in fact, if anyone wants to share in the chat window, apart from the storytelling, would also like to hear some suggestions, some tips, or some things that you have practiced in the consultative sales environment. And please feel free to type that in the chat box. Because this is my last slide, and after that, we'll open up for discussion. So just to summarize, put things in perspective, is we acknowledge that the way we have been doing business is transforming all around us. We need to bring in agility. We need to be agile enough to adapt to these changes, because what's working today might not work after a couple of weeks, and probably what would work after a couple of weeks might not work after a couple of months. You don't know. And together, all of us together, the L&D teams, the chief sales officers, and everyone else, let's help our sales teams to navigate through these change by supporting them. So the 5 pillars we spoke about: reskilling, building engagement with your prospects and customers, storytelling for brand positioning, consultative selling, position yourselves as consultants to the prospect and customer, and providing advanced sales enablement tools to your teams. And as I promised, that was my last slide. So now we'll open up for discussion. So I would request our audience to, if you have any questions, anything specific that you want to ask, please feel free to type in the chat box and the Q&A box. And also, if there's anything that you want to specifically talk about any of those 5 pillars. And I think for a simplicity perspective, I'll bring up the slide which talks about the 5 pillars so that we have it in front of us. So if you want to share one example of storytelling, or if you want to use share one example of how you used consulting approach, or any other interesting thing that you want to share with the audience today. Right, so we have a question, and the question is, how are you taking reselling to the next level beyond the basics? Or I just want to confirm this, did you meant reselling or reskilling? Reskilling. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. So, I mean, to be honest, we are all in the same storm, and we are all learning through the curves. I think some of the things that we have started doing right now, and there's one thing about having training programs, putting them through virtual instructor-led training sessions, or making them subscribe your Salesforce, making them subscribe to e-learning channels and all. But it's all about this all about practice. It's a practitioner's job. So at Harbinger, there are certain things that we are doing. For example, every day, literally every day, Monday to Friday, we have scheduled at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, all our sales team members, along with our sales leaders, we all get on a Zoom meeting. It's a very informal discussion, probably we promise to each other that we'll not be tough to each other and we'll just have coffee together. And what do we actually, the way we actually utilize that is we start sharing experiences with each other. We start sharing things that we have read, we have seen, we have heard while talking to the customers, prospects. And it's been what, about like 5 or 6 weeks since we have been doing this. And there's so much of learning, that's informal learning, I would say, that's happening for all of our team members there. The second one is a lot of us have started participating in these virtual forums. The other day we went to a online conference. I'll be honest in saying that, apart from delivering a session in the online conference, we weren't able to do anything, but we still were starting to get a hang of things as to how to interact. And once we do this the second time, the third time, and the fourth time, we keep practicing this, we'll start getting this. So, encouraging your sales team members to sales forums. And there's another initiative that we are starting at Harbinger is, having these roundtable discussions. So, you go to these good old conferences and you get that opportunity to have discussions in the roundtable conference and, tell your brand stories, establish a brand story, and, try to get build a network out of those connections. So how do you do this virtually? So we're going to actually have a particular topic selected every time. And then, we'll have these roundtable discussions. So sorry for that long answer, but the idea is we are enabling our remote sales force to practice more and more and learn on the go. So a combination of formal and informal learning. There's another question that's about Zoom fatigue. And thank you very much for putting up that question. So I'll read out the entire question. You spoke about Zoom fatigue. How is this being managed? How are you incorporating other ways of checking in with customers? What are examples of those other ways you are connecting with customers? Okay, so there are multiple questions in this, and I'll try to answer this one by one. Well, to be honest, I do not have an answer for the Zoom fatigue right now. And I would seriously, if anyone has or comes up with an answer sooner or later, I would definitely like to know, but the first and foremost thing I would agree is there's a definite Zoom fatigue that's happening. I think a lot of us would agree to that. The second question, how are you incorporating other ways of checking in with customers? So I think one of the key things is being empathetic. In terms of, you might have submitted a proposal which is of good value, and you want that sales closure to happen, but there are things that have changed, or there are things which have become static at the customer's end, and they're not able to make a decision. So you should be explicit in while reaching out to them is, hey, I'm not. We do understand that proposal is not moving anywhere, but you know what? We are working on this cool platform which enables you to nudge your learners through micro-learning app. And we have we have come up with a turnkey solution. So I just wanted to spend some time with you and show this to you. In fact, the other day, one of our prospects, she wanted to do a e-mentoring application and create learning around it. And she was very honest in saying that, hey, we are not going to do this for the next 2 years. And the response was like, okay, perfect, makes sense. But do you want to see what we are doing in that space, or how some of these products that we are developing, you might want to leverage that for e-mentoring? And she said, yes, let's talk for 20 minutes. But again, I would reiterate, as I said, we're not doing this for the next 2 years. So those are, some of the examples that I could think of right now. And of course, I'm sure there are a lot of other of our team members and people in the audience. If you want to share any thoughts, any comments, and specifically if anyone has an answer on the Zoom fatigue, please do feel free to type in the chat box. Thank you very much for these insightful questions. They are very helpful. Right, I think we have another few minutes for a few questions. For our audience who have, okay, there is, one of our audience has shared that we had a prospect who was thrilled because we scheduled a meeting that was simply a phone call. That's interesting. And so, probably that's one way to avoid Zoom fatigue. Thank you very much for that suggestion. Probably we should try that sometimes. Thank you. For our audience who have registered for this webinar, of course, as a follow-up, you'll get the recording of this webinar. And I think we would like to continue this conversation, this discussion. So if you have any specific thoughts, questions, comments, if you want to pick up on a specific point and discuss in detail, please do drop us a line at, you can send us an email at our company address, organization address. That's info@harbingerlearning.com. I'll repeat, it's info@harbingerlearning.com. And we will definitely love to answer those questions for you, or if you want to, just set up a phone call, not a Zoom meeting with us, please do write us. We'll do that. There's another question. What about selling training with products of high value? Right. I think this is one very interesting piece. Is what's most important in this entire piece is the value proposition and how critical is that need for the business. So we can actually put it in a 2x2 framework in terms of, one side we could look at a value proposition, and the other side we could look at the criticality of the need. And I think both of them, the value proposition and the criticality of the need, have to be in the highest quadrant to help make this decision. And at these point of times, there is a possibility, or there is a good chance that you should wear on your consultative hat and use the 3 Ps model in terms of proof of concept, prototyping, pilot, because what we have been hearing is a lot of organizations want to conserve cash at these times, and they want to see how the market responds when it opens up. So they might not want to put in or take in a lot of risks. So if they are able to validate that their investment is going to give them or deliver them the right set of results, and that's by piloting the prototype in a closed group environment, that might just possibly help. Right, thank you. My colleague Isha has just put in the email ID in the chat box for everyone's knowledge. You can use that for writing us, info@harbingerlearning.com. I really want to take a moment here and thank you once again to the entire audience group who showed up for today's webinar. And again, I think this was set up on Zoom. So yeah, that's the tool that we use as an organization. So thank you very much for coming up for the Zoom meeting. And the participation, I think, was pretty encouraging. You know, and one of the things which we say in remote selling is it has to be a dual thing. So a lot of us in the audience might be our customers and prospects, and they would understand the need in terms of if the participation is there, there's always an encouragement for this for the person on the other side. So that's also one of the key things I think which we should talk about sometime later. But once again, thank you very much for taking the time out for this webinar. It's Thursday evening, and thank you very much for the participation. Let's take a moment here. I'll just ask if we do have any other questions, thoughts, any story to tell. Please put it in the chat box. We'll hang around for another 2 to 3 minutes. If there's any new question or new comment that comes up, we'll take it up.